All right. In five, four, three, two. Welcome everybody to this week's episode of the GBC Power to the People podcast. And today we have a very special guest in
I'm
honor
so
of,
excited. I'm so
yeah,
excited.
yes, my good friend and colleague Dana Freeling, the chair of our environmental council, is here to talk about Environment and Climate Change Council is here. Uh, yeah, and she's also the founding chair for DA Finland. She's an all-around great person, and I'm so glad to welcome you,
I
Dana.
mean, I think
Welcome.
she's met John Kerry. At least I've seen him.
Yeah, you have been with John Kerry.
I
You've been
have
with
been.
all the luminaries,
Thank you, Angela. I am really delighted to be here with you all.
getting the
People
people.
at DA, for sure, and especially on this Earth Month and facing what we're facing now in the climate environmental space, not just in the United States, but across the globe. It's an important discussion to have now.
Yeah, and the main reason it's so important is because it appears to me that climate change has kind of dropped off the radar for everyone. It's dropped off the radar in the sense that people aren't talking about it, but there's still these terrible storms that are happening in the United States and fires and other things and that are happening also around the world. Um, Tell us a little bit about where we are, Dana, in this climate challenge.
Angela, you hit the nail on the head, but not only is it dropping off people's radar, it has become a dirty word, sadly. I work in the environmental space and in other capacities in the United States with other groups, and I know that out of fear, um, the word climate has been taken off of all government documents. You cannot mention it if you want money, if you don't want to be a target of the retribution. You do not mention climate or DEI, or there's a few other trigger words. And I suppose that the zone has been so flooded with so many dire consequences from the new policies and behaviors of the administration that people are kind of putting out the fires of, democracy or versus autocracy, other kind of our voting rights, that the environmental and climate policies have been suppressed to try to put out these other fires, which seem so relevant and immediate. This is, of course, dangerous because every month that passes, the climate crisis is getting worse. We see that. And it's not just that our seas and lands the climate is changing and more disasters are increasing, but this rollback of federal funds and federal personnel across agencies in the United States means that we don't have the resources to even cope with this. We have FEMA, emergency response, which is having its money and personnel cut. How insane is that? We have scientists in the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, in NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and the NFS, the National Foundation for Science. All the scientists just being cut, not to mention what's going on with Health and Human Services and those people who overlook our environmental health.
Yes.
We have
Dana, I have to say, I used to date this really cute guy that worked at NOAA, and he was a cartographer. And I didn't know what that was until he told me about it. And then I got all fascinated with NOAA and the agency and all the work and stuff that they do. And he was a humble guy making a decent, a humble little living. And so when we hear like all these countries saying these are real people, not just the impact it's going to have for the greater society, but these are real people losing real jobs, and real incomes.
Tens and thousands of government workers that are humble and qualified, not undertaking these jobs because they make a lot of money. They're doing it because they're passionate about the work they do and being of service and doing good for people. There's something else which nobody is talking about, which is just heartbreaking. The extraordinary work that the Biden administration did in bringing in legislation that he was our climate president, the IRA, $1.2 trillion that's really going towards all kinds of programs for our energy transition and environmental justice. Money, we thought I was at COP at the UN Environmental Conference in Baku in November, and I met with so many of our leading state senators and governors and people from the White House, and we thought the train has left the station. We are safe. This cannot be stopped. This money has been allocated. Money, billions of dollars that have been put into bank accounts for marginalized and Black and brown communities to help with environmental health, with energy transition, with emergency relief funds. This money has been frozen by the Trump administration illegally. The courts have said he needs to release it, but he is not, because it's going towards Black and brown communities or indigenous communities, illegally frozen that money that was passed by Congress and allocated and put into bank accounts for these reasons. It is just mortifying.
Speaking of mortifying, and not to get off the track, but to get back, you said that this money specifically, I wanted you to say that again, because is there money that went to, like, how is this? You say this is direct, this is another like a DEI, like was it seen as DEI or something? Like
Well,
why?
yeah, it's DEI in conjunction with climate, the two dirty words. And so this money, they've said no, they've frozen it. He's frozen it in bank accounts, that it cannot be this money that has been allocated, passed by Congress and allocated by the Biden administration, and it's been frozen in banks.
That is really horrifying. You know, I expected that the climate would suffer because of Trump's taking office. But what I didn't expect was Noah being, decimated like that. And I think I mean climate, yeah, that's gonna mess up a lot of things. But the fact is that Noah was our early warning system, so that if there was a hurricane or if there were tornadoes or a giant snowstorm or whatever else, that it notified people about these things. And there's been several big tornadoes that have happened recently in the Midwest, that I don't think these people are going to get any help at all because, of course,
You're not
FEMA is
really a
gone.
storm. Yeah, you're not really a storm tracker, but I remember in the past you were like, we already had so many, was it tornadoes or something before the season came. Are we seeing that
Yep.
again?
Yes, tornado season started a little bit early. Same thing with fire season. It also started early this year. So these are all effects of climate change, at least Would you say that, Dana, that all these different storm seasons and fire seasons are starting early because of climate change?
Starting early. I'm from Texas, from the tornado belt, and we see that they're more virulent and they're starting earlier. It is not the only cause, but it is certainly exacerbated, as well as the fires in California. You know, you had um, Christy Nome going into California and saying, we're not going to give you money. And she's now slashing funds and personnel from FEMA, which is our can you think of anything more idiotic than cutting our emergency response organization in the midst?
Well, yeah, I can't think of anything more idiotic, but what I do remember is back during the campaign, Trump kept going on about how Biden is not helping people, and the Biden administration was, and now it's his turn, and he's not actually helping anyone. He stopped helping the people in North Carolina. There was a big, I think there was a big flood in Kentucky, and he's not helping those people. And I just read something recently that this is from an article that was it's dated April 12th. So just a few just a few days ago that there have been three tornado outbreaks in 3 weeks, and that there were more than 100 tornadoes with hail the size of baseballs and hurricane strength wind gust. And they it's it's very shocking to me that somehow people don't know that this is climate change or climate related. I don't know what people are thinking. What's your thoughts, Dana?
I think, like the fires, that it is not solely caused by climate change, but it's certainly exacerbated by it. And, you know, it's and this is just the beginning, because we've all seen what has had happened with hurricane season. We understand what the risks are and what the financial risks are for
Yes.
not preparing the communities. You've got the Florida coastline, which is going to be all but unlivable. It's nearly impossible to get insurance in California and in Florida.
In Florida.
Going to have severe economic impact on the entire, financial system in the United States.
Yes.
Okay, I
If
something. Wait a minute. I'm so sorry, Angela,
no, go
but you
ahead.
can't insure your home in California or Florida.
No, not really.
It's getting
No.
because of the natural disasters.
Yes. I mean, it's not, when you get insurance is
It's not yet, but this is coming. They know.
no, in Florida, it's already happened. I used to live in Florida, and the thing is that when I lived there, there were hurricanes, but it wasn't like, it wasn't guaranteed that there were going to be, throughout hurricane season. There might be one that actually made landfall. But these days, they are almost all of them are making landfall. And so, yeah, um, I used to work for the St. John's River Water Management District in Florida, and not doing anything scientific, but I did IT stuff. But I had to learn about the business, what they did in order to help people. Um, and one of the things that I learned is that they had been trying for years to get a law that would say you can no longer build houses in certain places because by the coastline, also by the various rivers, because they were bound to flood, and it was just getting worse as climate change progressed. And they were never able to get this law. And so now so that was in the late 90s, and people have still been building their houses. And so now the insurance companies are no longer insuring people's houses. Because if you build a house or buy a house that's sitting on a riverbank or sitting on the beach, like you're just, you might, I'm not going to say you should, it's a little bit ludicrous actually, because you know what's going to happen. And especially with FEMA, if they're no longer helping people rebuild, then it's even, yeah, it's even more like possible that you could have a house and it get destroyed in a storm or a flood, and then you just have nothing left. You literally have nothing left. Um,
And who are the people most acutely impacted? Of course, lower income, marginal,
yes,
Black, Brown, Native American. And this was something that was very special about the initiative of the Biden administration. They had this idea called Justice 40. So 40% of all funds that went towards the IRA and the energy transition, 40%, all projects went specifically to these marginalized communities to help them build resilience, to help them build programs, bring renewable energies to their community to help protect their environmental health. And this has just all been wiped out. These are the most vulnerable communities, and this has been wiped out by the Trump administration, sadly.
yeah, yeah. You know, there was recently a case, and maybe you're aware of this, Dana. I think it was in Louisiana, and it was in this cancer alley. And under the Biden administration, they had taken um, this town, or the people in this town, plus the EPA, had taken this an oil company to court. And they were just about to come to a resolution. And then Trump came in and the EPA withdrew whatever, withdrew the suit. And I'm just like, this is so I don't want to harp on this like about voting, because I know people don't like this, but it's the reality that we can do all the work we want advocating for for this cause or that cause, but if we don't have the people in office to, like, work on these issues for us, then we haven't done anything if we don't vote. It's this every episode. I hope that people can realize that now, that voting is important.
I was gonna say this is the part where we say, if you're an overseas American, go to vote from abroad.org. But Angela, actually, please let them know about all the exciting things they can do now, right? Because we've got a resistance section on the website.
That's right. That's
We,
right.
there are actions that people can do right now, right? We need to vote in the people that can do the work, but we need to save our vote. So there's this bad thing called the SAVE Act that passed the
Yes.
House that's going to go to the Senate. So if you care about anything, the environment, people in Cancer Row getting screwed, people getting deported, disappearing, um, being forced to self-deport. I mean, the list is long and egregious, but there are things that you can do right now. The first one is to call your senators. They're at home now, I believe. Call them at home and call the
Yes.
DC office, right? Harass them,
Yes. They have
harass
a
them.
2 week vacation, which I don't want to say like I can't believe they have a two, but I looked at the Senate calendar, and these jokers are only working like 10 days a month, which is, I mean, the House and the Senate, they're on the same calendar. And normally the calendars are a little bit different, but they're not working very often. So they have plenty of time to look at all your calls. So
And
go
they
ahead.
do, and they have, and also say, you're not working that much. Let's have more town halls. We know they're running from those town halls. But so also call your Democratic representatives and say, look, I know, oh gosh, those four people that voted for save or whatever, we need to harass them.
Ugh,
But call your representatives and say, look, we but let's have some town halls and show everybody else what we can be doing. We voted. We know you're working for us. Harass the representatives, the Democratic. Call Cory Booker and tell him we love him, right? Call Jasmine Crockett. Tell her we love her because they
Yeah,
are going
that's
after her.
Dana's.
That's Dana, and they're going after your girl, Dana.
But I have to say, it is even more important that we flood the red senators, the Republican senators, their offices in DC, their offices in their home states. They're the ones we need to harass, to let them know that we will not stand by our military being disenfranchised, that's being stationed
Yes.
overseas, that this will disenfranchise millions of American women who are married, who did you know that 60% of Americans don't have passports?
Yes, I did know that. It's most a lot of people don't even have like driver's license or ID cards.
Or you
It's
birth certificate, you're a married woman, your birth certificate doesn't match your driver's license, it doesn't match, you've got to spend, the country, state by state, will be spending billions upon billions of dollars trying to get passports for people because
Listen, you know what, Dana? When voting fraud is so small.
the voting body is so small.
yes,
Because what's the point of it? They're trying to say, oh, and people are voting that don't
the
have a right
point
to
is
vote.
voter suppression. That's the point. There's no other point to this than voter suppression. And to be honest, most of the time, the people that are voting incorrectly are Republicans. They're not. So this is just one more case of them projecting their ill deeds onto everyone else. We don't we don't have a lot of voter fraud. There's no need for this act. The fact that they want your name to match your birth certificate is also like a little bit of a tell that it is for voter suppression
You
because
know what?
I I can't say
Go
this enough.
on. Mhm.
J.D. Vance, not his name. Don't know if he ever changed it for real, but that is not his real name.
Let's cancel this passport. But I've been married twice. Am I a third marriage? I'm on my third marriage. I think it was after my second marriage that I stopped changing my name. I was like, you know what? Because the first one, oh, excited, 22, get married, can't wait to have the last name, right? 9 years later, okay, back. I was back to maiden. Got married again 4 years after that. Why did I change again? Thinking that's the romantic thing. 4 years later, I'm back to maiden. I said, I don't care what happens next in my love life. I am keeping just that hassle. So I can't imagine mass scramble trying to do it now. And I'm thinking now, where's my birth certificate? I know it's here somewhere in this house in a binder that I have with all my documents. But if I would have to, woo, I'm telling you, it's not going to be easy. And if this law goes into effect and they say, okay, you need to come back and re-register, because I don't know if the states can have that kind of discretion.
You'll have to go back and re-register, Adrian. There was an amendment by Julie Johnson, the new representative from Dallas, who took Colin Allred's seat. Colin Allred had run against Ted Cruz, and she proposed an amendment. She said, I'm against this, but if you have to pass it, please use this amendment, which said that people can register digitally, remotely, which means, we could take a picture of
Mhm.
the passport or whatever. People can send in the information so it doesn't disenfranchise US citizens abroad or people with disabilities who can't go in. It was voted down. It was not accepted. So the point is that all Americans living overseas will need to go back to our voting state and register in person every year.
Well, see, first of all, okay, thanks for queuing me up to say DC statehood. I don't even have a state, and they're messing with our budget. We ain't gonna be able to handle that. The
Yeah.
states are gonna be overwhelmed. So it sounds like a nightmare, and I've been really, really upset today because that El Salvadorian president said, no, we're not going to work with trying to bring that it just breaks my heart That's suburban Maryland outside my hometown. I watched a video where faith leaders and other people came. They were outside of the White House protesting. That woman is there with her child and baby in a stroller. And
Heartbreaking.
it is beyond, I mean, it's heartbreaking. And look, and here's the thing, I'm scared to go home for my mother's service in September. Walking around black in the United States and a woman is a precarious thing. Always has been. It is a precarious thing, which is even more precarious now. So I just, who's to say I won't disappear? They're disappearing people.
Yes, they're disappearing people. That's really very frightening to me that they are scooping people up, I should say kidnapping people off the street and without a trial, sending them to where is this? El Salvador, this jail, and then they when they discover they have a mistake, they won't bring you back, which is insanity. And I also heard just recently that Trump had a conversation with this president of El Salvador saying he needed to build like 5 more prisons because they're going to start
Hoarding of
bringing deporting Americans.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we got a lot of problems, but the environment is definitely one of them, right? Because it affects everything. So I know Dana was mentioning, and Angela, I need a little bit of education. What is Cancer Alley? I know what it sounds like, but it sounds like a horrible place where a lot of
Yes.
black or brown people live, and it's a lot of industrial pollution. Is that it?
Yes, they have a lot of oil refineries in Louisiana, and a lot of these people have gotten all sorts of cancers. It's kind of crazy. I have a little clip that maybe it might be helpful if I shared about the history of environmental justice.
Okay, I want to mention about this Louisiana Cancer Alley, Colette Battle, Pichon Battle, who is one
Mm,
of my heroes. She came to speak to us in one of our climate rallies. African American activist who lives in Louisiana and is on top of this. She is a powerhouse, amazing. I got to meet her at COP in November, and I saw her working with as well Ali Ziadi, who was the White House environmental climate advisor, and she had really helped the Biden administration move forward. She had been working with them to help resolve these issues. Now it's a dirty word.
yeah. Yeah, I love Colette also. She really was just amazing, an amazing person, an amazing speaker. Um, yeah, and so what I don't want to get stuck on stupid, but I'm probably gonna get stuck when people didn't vote for Kamala Harris. The various minority communities in the United States lost a lot of opportunities to clean up the environment, to get make improvements on their homes, to shut down some of these factories that are polluting everywhere. Um, Basically, I mean, anything having to do with environment, it's our chances are gone now. And I don't know, Dana, do you think that we're gonna go over 2 degrees warming temperature?
I think the community has now abandoned 1.5. 2024 had already exceeded 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And I think
Wow.
is to keep it below 2 degrees. And the good news is that countries around the world, the EU, and even China is making great strides. Even though they're the number 2 emitter, they are making great strides in helping the world transition to renewable energy. They're producing the goods. They're producing the solar panels, the batteries. It's important. The world community knows now that we have lost not just the leadership of the United States in terms of 1.5 as a goal and bringing climate under control as a goal, but we have lost a financial commitment to helping countries in the global south who are most at risk from climate change, from helping to mitigate those disastrous, effects. But
Yes.
other countries, other groups are being forced to step up. And I haven't lost hope. I have to keep some hope in mind.
Yes.
The European Union, the UK is doing a lot. I really have to keep some hope. I mean, what else can you do?
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, there is always hope, and there are possibilities. Um, it's just I don't know, as long as we have actually what I think, and I could be totally wrong, but I think that something really bad will happen, and then all of a sudden the Trump administration will be talking about the environment, you know, but it's going to take something really unfortunate to happen.
And
Um,
takes economic, just the pure economics of an energy transition. We know that the two biggest emitters are energy, what we use as energy, and then, of course, the construction industry. And scientists and developers are making progress all the time in creating materials that are not emitting for construction, not emitting so many greenhouse gases. And now the price of renewable energy has overtaken the price that is less until now the price of oil has gone down. But until very recently, it actually was more economical to invest in renewable energy sources, be it water, geothermal, solar, or wind, than it was to use traditional fossil fuels. So
yes,
the more these develop, the more they become available, the more the prices go down. The economics will drive our energy transition and our capacity to meet the net zero goals, to help start bringing down the effects of climate change.
yes, do you remember, Dana, that Trump had this meeting with all the oil executives and told them that whoever gave him like a $500 million or something for his campaign, that he would he would take care of them, and then they did give him money. So here we are. Here we
Okay.
are today. Yeah, but let's turn quickly to a brief history of environmental justice. I think it's important that people understand what this is and how it's functioning. Um, okay, let's take a listen.
Nationally, the facilities where we dump our garbage and process dangerous chemicals tend to be located in poor and minority communities. The people who live there have little or no protection from the industries around them, and things could get worse. So there's this idea of environmental justice. It's pretty simple. Communities shouldn't be forced to deal with more pollution because they belong to a certain race, national origin, or income bracket. Yet America has struggled over the years to implement any serious policy that actually protects these communities. So let's lay out the ways the government has failed them.
We will not allow Warren County to become a dump site.
The fight for environmental justice took off in 1982, when residents of Warren County, North Carolina mounted mass demonstrations against a plan to dump contaminated soil in a landfill in their community. The EPA investigated 4 similar landfills in southern states and found that they were all located in Black or low-income neighborhoods. In 1987, the United Church of Christ Racial Justice Commission found that around the country, hazardous waste facilities were more likely to be located in mostly minority communities. Amid mounting proof, the federal government was forced to act.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush.
So in 1992, President George H.W. Bush founded the Office of Environmental Justice inside the EPA. 2 years later, President Bill Clinton signed an executive order requiring federal agencies to consider environmental justice in all of their policies, as well as extending civil rights protection to environmental discrimination. But Congress never passed a bill to make Clinton's executive order law. Then came George W. Bush. His administration shifted the focus of the Office of Environmental Justice from protecting low-income and minority communities to all people, leaving vulnerable populations without a federal environmental advocate.
80% of New Orleans, including much of downtown, is underwater.
Under Bush, many environmental civil rights claims were rejected or delayed for years. In 2009, after President Barack Obama's election, his administration recommitted to environmental justice.
Generally speaking, in this country, a lot of environmentally problematic facilities tend to be located in places where poor folks live.
Yet, during the 2 years Democrats controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House, they didn't file a single bill focused on strengthening environmental justice protections. Passing major environmental legislation faded further when Republicans took control of Congress in the 2010 midterm elections. Now, President Donald J. Trump is making good on his vow to weaken the EPA.
Environmental protection, what they do is a disgrace. Every week they come out with new regulations. They're making it
Who's
impossible.
going to protect the environment?
We'll be fine with the environment. We can leave a little bit.
This budget, a 31% cut to the EPA, $2.6 billion cut away from the EPA. That's what the president wants.
As the EPA loses funding and regulations are rolled back, vulnerable communities may very likely fall through the cracks. I'm Talia Buford. I'll be covering these communities and digging into systemic environmental injustice. If you have something to tell me, email me at talia.buford@propublica.org.
Okay. So that's a little bit of a history of
Okay,
environment.
wait a minute. The part that got me, did he say we can leave a little bit? That we
Yeah.
can leave a little bit of the earth for the next
Of
generation?
the environment, yes.
We
Maybe
can
just
leave a
some
little bit.
oxygen, like, I don't know, probably not oxygen, but yeah, we can leave a little bit.
There was one person they did not mention in there, which I'd like to make a shout out to, the great Robert Bullard, who is considered the father of environmental justice, professor in Texas, who I also had the great opportunity to meet last summer in Chicago at the Democratic Convention, who is a tireless advocate and spokesperson for this very important cause. And he's been at this for 40, 50 years.
Yeah, and it
Okay,
gets better, then it gets worse. Yeah.
Okay, the other thing that got me, that pisses me off. So in the 2 years, God, I hate midterms. But in the 2 years that we had the House, the Senate, and the White House, the Dems didn't put up one bill. We didn't
That
push nothing
was
through.
Well, that was during Obama's term.
I know
Yeah.
he used all his gravitas for the healthcare system that
Yeah.
America's having now. So thank God for that. But still, not even put up a bill. No Democrat bought
We-
nothing. forward. The
Environment.
president doesn't put. It should have come from the House or the Senate. You know what?
Yeah, but the
Probably-
environment has always been a low priority unless something bad happens. When something bad happens, then everybody snaps to it. But until that, which is really a terrible way to go, I think. I mean,
Dana, how come you? I'm going to ask Angela too, because you both said, okay, it's low priority. Because obviously you're right. People focus on what they think is important. Why is this so important to you? Why have you taken on this work when now it's a dirty word to be an environmental activist?
Well, I have been working in development aid and with NGOs most of my career, going back almost 40 years, really. I think I just aged myself. And
But you look fabulous, so nobody will believe you. So.
I see, the words have changed. The lingo has changed, but I have seen the impact on the communities. I understand that this is, when I'm working in communities and in sub-Saharan Africa or in South Asia, I've seen how this impacts the health, the environmental health of the communities and the population. So it was why did I take this on for Democrats Abroad? Because of my professional involvement in this fair for so long, and at the same time, after Trump was elected the first time, I had not been that active, certainly not in Finland politically, but I just cowered under the sheets and sobbed for 3 weeks. And then I said, I didn't do enough. Now I have to start and do something. And I started organizing here, and not that long after, maybe 9 months later, Meryl Oates showed up in Finland. And I learned about this organization. There's this thing called Democrats Abroad. So we started organizing. Trump and Putin met in Finland. We had lots of protests, and we got together a critical mass. And I founded Democrats Abroad Finland. I was its first chair for the first 4 years. And then we started, during that time, I saw this gap in the subject matter, that there was no environmental caucus. Somebody else who had been active in getting this up, I had mentioned it to Ann Hess early on when I first met her, but I didn't want to take that on. And then Alexander Lee had began to get an environmental caucus up, and then he was forced to step aside. And there weren't many people who had the combination of DA leadership experience and subject matter experience. So that is why I took on the mantle of organizing, with Angela's tremendous help, because this could never have gotten off the ground as well as it did without her extraordinary organizational skills. And
like, I know how organized she is and can get a caucus up and running. She set the blueprint. I saw her when I was doing the Global Caucus, Global Volunteer Coordinator, when I was leading that. I saw somebody, Sherry Temple came and said, I found someone who wants to do a Black caucus. It was like, great. She had the thing up and running in 6 weeks, and it was a blueprint for everyone that came after. But I want to ask you, one of my proudest moments as a DNC member was being and not standing up and speaking with Julia Bryant, supporting Michelle Dietrich, saying, yes, the DNC needs an environmental caucus. And this is why. Council, I'm sorry, at the DNC, it's a council. And this is why, we can speak our stories because we hear our stories from our members around the world, right? So we can talk about this. We have members that live in places that you mentioned that are being directly impacted. I can remember my colleague coming up from Mariana Islands talking about, if y'all don't help us now, we may literally go under, So talk about a little bit about your work with Michelle Dietrich and the DNC, because I know you all collaborate a lot, and what you know about what the DNC may be doing, if you know.
Is extraordinary. What an amazing leader she is. She's also been instrumental in helping me grow this organization and guide this organization in coordination with other state environmental caucus chairs. She has a fantastic network called DEM, the Democratic Environmental Network. And we meet monthly, and we coordinate on ballot initiatives and organizing and events. We spent a lot of time together in Chicago last summer, but I have met her several times because she makes the efforts. When I was in Texas and going to the convention, then she came and met me there. She goes to every state. She is just tireless. The grassroots organizational skill that she has. Also within the labor movement, she's from Michigan. She's been very active there, but she has really grown they call themselves a council on the climate and environment and climate. But she really has, out of nothing, created a real powerhouse within the DNC. I think she has the ear and the respect of people across the DNC. And I know you were there as an original signatory to the council, and Julia and a few other folks who were involved in the DNC at that time.
Oh yeah, it was a no-brainer. For me, it was a no-brainer. And it was kind of one of those things. She's like, wait a minute, we don't already have this? Just like Angela, she was like, wait a minute, we don't already have a global Black caucus? And it takes that type of vision and leadership. I had no idea that she came to Texas. So she came to Texas to meet you from Michigan. That's fantastic. What was that conference? And talk a little bit about the global conferences that you attend about the environment.
When Michelle came down, I told her I was going to be attending the Texas Democratic Convention, and we had been I'd had her on a guest for a couple of different programs, and we spoke all the time. So when she knew that I was going and she was going for the convention, I knew a lot of people. I said, come and I'll introduce you to a lot of people, because I still maintain very deep roots in Texas. Both in the political arena and the environmental arena. So I organized some meetings for her and was really thrilled to spend the weekend. It was also my first opportunity to meet Jasmine Crockett, who was then running for Congress for the first time. She did when she found out she had not yet been elected, and she was so charismatic. And I said, hey, hi, I know you're going to be the next Congresswoman. I'm from Democrats Abroad. And she said, Democrats Abroad? Are you kidding? You won my first legislative seat for us. We were waiting afterwards at the very end for those last 90 votes to come in and they were from abroad. You won my election for me. And I said, can you say this on video? And she did. So I have maintained, I've tried to get her back here to speak, but I mean, she's just taken off like a meteor.
That's okay. She's doing the work. It's okay, but
she was so sweet. And she really does appreciate us. I know she does, but it's, she was going to come speak with us in the autumn, but then she was appointed a co-chair for the Harris campaign. And I think she just, really had a lot of, but very grateful.
You know what, Dana? I love that you said grateful. Yeah, I love that you actually met her. And again, people don't think representatives are real people. She was a real person, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about Jasmine, just because she's right now one of these American heroes? So she was a real person. She's really little. She's smart. You say she's charismatic. What does Texas, they obviously voted her in. I'm so sorry about the measles stuff going on in your state. That's another thing we could talk about. But does she, from what you can tell, will she be reelected?
Well,
she's her time.
80% or 90% of the vote in her district. She was pretty much handpicked by Edie Bernice Johnson, who was maybe the longest serving African-American woman in Congress. She covered South Dallas. She was an extraordinary person in her own right. Just an amazing woman who did pass away fairly recently, but before she died, there was an open primary, of course, but Jasmine was her pick, and it was her pick for a reason. So Jasmine was able to, I know a lot of people did run to fill that, primary seat, but it was Jasmine who won. And she could not have been more warmer and more engaging. She's extremely articulate. I knew she would be elected because of the district. Dallas is a blue city. They did some gerrymandering, so now one of their representatives is just this horrible blonde witch. I don't know, GOP witch, but most of Dallas is a blue city, as well as Houston and Austin. So it's not all of Texas that is problematic. Julie Johnson, who has now replaced Colin Allred, she's the one that made this amendment with to the SAVE Act in hopes that at least they would do that, but it was not passed either. But yeah, Jasmine Crockett couldn't be more proud to have her.
Now you come from a big oil state, so environmental racism is a problem in Texas as well. Like, is there cancer? Are there cancer alleys in Texas, like in Louisiana, from the oil refineries?
We have different problems in Texas, and there have been oil spills. It is the largest producer of oil in the country, but did you know it is also the largest producer of wind energy in the country and the second largest producer of solar? So it is not only the oil industry that controls the state. The renewables are extremely important. But the oil industry, I would like to stop pumping. But for the time being, I think that it's a transition that's going to happen. We can't just completely cut off fossil fuels, or we can cut off coal, but gas and oil, they're not going to just end overnight. But one of the things that the Biden administration did, and the world community, was to put regulations on the release of methane, which is 80 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. And there's something in the oil industry called when they let the gas go, and I've now forgotten the term. They let the gas go to release pressure, and it's quite dangerous. And then there are what they call orphan wells, which have been abandoned but are still seeping and still emitting methane. And both some of the regulations that were passed, which were led by the Biden administration and his team, the methane rule at the COPs, and then the legislation that was passed in the United States to control these orphan wells and the unnecessary release of methane. All of that is being rolled back now by the Trump administration. And it's also, these gases are unhealthy for people who are sick or for anybody. So this is really problematic. But in Texas, there are people who are fighting to keep this industry cleaner. There are certain oil companies which are more responsible in keeping their wells clean than others. It is not a level playing field. And I know a lot of people who have been in the oil industry or in the oil or gas industry in Texas, people whose livelihoods depend on it. And, how do you then diversify into use some of these assets, these stranded assets, take them up for other purposes? And this is something that the government can and was helping these folks with. But of course, Trump administration, a lot of that has been abandoned.
You know what? Last question for me for the moment that it popped up. But I remember seeing something about, I don't even want to say his name, but one of these billionaires that's doing space stuff, and how that was hurting their community, and that they were trying to incorporate and have their own town and have their own laws. But yesterday,
Elon Musk, who's taken over Brownsville with SpaceX, and you can watch a video about this. The Brownsville community had voted for it, thinking that it was going to bring all this money, but all it's done is create waste. It has prevented the community from using large swaths of coastal area, which is
I saw that one because it was like the beach. They were like, this used to be our beach, but it's not our beach anymore.
Right, that's right. Brownsville, which is right on it's across from Padre Island, which is a nice area, and just on the border with Mexico. And of course, a lot of the companies are moving to Texas because there's no state income tax. And
Okay, well, what about what happened yesterday? Yeah,
of
no. Okay, yesterday, did you see? Because it was the other billionaire with the space company,
Jeff
and they
Bezos,
went up with and that was in Texas. I was like, what are they doing all this in Texas? But so how that's not Brownsville, right? And how is that impacting that community, if you know? It looked deserted.
Bezos has his blue, what is it called? What is it
It was
called?
blue something, and I watched the whole thing because Gail King was on it, and I got hooked. It was blue before I realized that it was his company because at the end they were like, JB, I'm not even gonna say his name is gonna be the first one to greet him up. I was like, wait a minute, I just watched this whole thing, but it's blue something, and it was amazing to watch. But
It's
how
Blue
is that
Origin.
impacting Blue
Blue,
Orange?
yeah. So of course, Texas has it has the land. It has no state income tax. It you can build facilities there, and you can build houses there, and you can build all kinds of things with much greater ease than you can in a place like California, which is far more regulated, which has much higher taxes. It is just, that's why so much of the growth is coming to Texas, because it is business friendly because of the lack of taxes, and they're able to build housing for people, which is affordable. And that is important because, as we know, in a lot of the blue states, the last place I actually lived in the United States was California. I've been in graduate school in Northern California, and it was a different place back then. When I left, normal people could live in the Bay Area, could live in San Francisco. The people who
Okay,
cleaned
Dana, now you're dating yourself.
McDonald's, they could live there. It is impossible.
And that's why I tease and say you're dating yourself. Because you said before you dated yourself. No, because I remember too when you could afford to live in the Bay Area. We're dating ourselves. Teachers cannot afford to live in the Bay, not have without living with three other teachers or something ridiculous. Adults can't have proper lives without communal housing. So we're dating ourselves. So what made that go outrageous? Was it? I thought it was tech boom or
Well, it is the tech industry, but it's the fact that the um prices uh, the prices are very high there. There's limited housing there, and there's so many constraints on how you can build and where you can build. It was the same thing with high-speed rail in California. They were talking about it in the 80s to build a high-speed train. When I moved to California, I had moved from Japan and was using the Shinkansen, the bullet train, regularly. And in California, growth, where they were talking about it, then building a high-speed rail. They passed it by law in 2008 or 2010, and they allocated money, but they haven't been able to build it. One, environmental law, too many regulations. For some reason, the bureaucracy has gotten into the way of building the infrastructure and building the housing that they need to keep up with the population and to enable normal people to live without driving cars and to live in the metroplexes that are so expensive now.
Well, I just have to say, I know that there's a lot of regulations in California, primarily because of earthquakes and also fire now. Um, I'm gonna say that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just they have to find a way to make it cheaper. There was I think it was either last year or the year before, there was a big earthquake in Turkey.
Yes.
And there was this huge earthquake that destroyed all these houses, this whole town practically it destroyed. But the reason that it was destroyed was because the houses were built before there were earthquake regulations. And instead of asking the people to get up to code, they grandfathered them in. And then when there was an earthquake, all their houses pancaked because they weren't built up to a code that, that can withstand earthquakes. So yeah, I understand. It's sometimes some places it's difficult with
It's,
regulations, but it's
I,
also necessary.
I also, California has one of the largest, as a state, one of the largest economies in the world. They are the leaders in climate and environment. There is no question about that. All the innovation, all the practice, they are the leaders worldwide. They lead the entire world. I love the state. I'm just saying these are these are problems that we need to think about and figure out if we are going to gain the trust of the voters as Democrats. What do we do? I mean,
You know what, Dana?
to take a hard look at what are we doing wrong? How can we do better?
Yeah, no, I love you said that because what I was just going to say is to harp a little bit more. As Angela said, regulations are necessary, right? If we didn't have it, and this is what's so scary about this administration as well. They want to strip a lot of regulations that keep us safe. But instead of trying to make it cheaper, just freaking budget, stop taking such a big profit, right? And spend the money to do what's environmentally sound. I mean, I propose that. And then cost will come down eventually as whatever happens. But if it, just like you say, instead of that was a horrible mistake the Turkish government made, instead of making them spend the money to come up to code their grandfather did, spend the money it costs. But the profits are enormous that these companies are making, right? That do this. So I don't think it necessarily has to be cheaper to done the right way. Right? We're not talking about the difference between a Rolls Royce and a Pinto. We're talking about the whole system needs to be safe and working up to code, not like people get to decide, if they're going to be flash or not. This is what it costs to do things properly, to build safe buildings in earthquake zones, to whatever it is you have to do. I mean, like, I don't even know. Okay, regulations to rise prices, but as Angela say, they're necessary. Very rarely is anything regulated to the point where it wasn't necessary. The company, the sector always complains, right? That's why we don't have gun laws, because the NRA, they got that sector covered, right? Even though we know it needs to be better regulated. Tobacco finally caved, right? I wish I had an old cigarette pack around here because those horrible pictures that are on there, they weren't happy about that. At least that's happening in Europe.
Oil and gas are the tobacco industry on
Yes.
steroids.
Yes, that is true.
Which is very sad.
Yeah, that we can't lead a healthy life without people trying to interfere in that so they can make more money off of
I
our
was just saying, in the
continued
United
misery.
States, yeah, you just can't say because it costs too much money, right? Because that's just, well, look at shareholder profit, right? Or, I mean, there's always pay the fair wage, do the regulation, make it safe, think long term. Do you want to be associated with a freaking building that went down, right? Because, you knew it wasn't safe with the new clauses. I'm thinking like that builder architect somehow, somebody, I don't know, maybe they were dead.
Well,
Somebody knew that wasn't right.
if you recall that Kamala Harris had put forth the idea of giving everyone that wanted to buy a house a certain amount of money. I think it was $25,000
It was $25,000.
to help people buy houses. So that would have helped. I'd like $25,000 to help me buy a house. I think it would make a big difference to me.
And listen,
how
you're a
much
little
I-
entrepreneurial. There was 50,000 to start a business.
yeah, I mean,
You had
yes,
a plan.
exactly. She had a plan for all these things, but people preferred lies.
Well, I was gonna say
Sweet
the
sounding
people that
lies.
couldn't afford eggs are really not having eggs for Easter now, right? And I don't mean to be
No. Oh
facetious.
my God. I heard that I saw something, an article that said people were dyeing potatoes instead of eggs for for Easter. Yeah, it's real. Like it's not, I didn't make that up. It's a real thing that's happening.
I don't know whether to laugh or cry because that is, can you imagine the kid? It's your first Easter you're gonna remember and you got a dyed potato. You're gonna think this is
Yeah.
how it is?
Yeah, it's not that great. They don't look that good, you know. I mean, a blue potato is not.
You know what? And not to make light, and bless the parents that still want to keep the tradition and do that. But let's talk about before Dana's got to go, and I can talk with you all day. How is because you hit on something that's really getting on my nerves. Okay, organic food, you pay a little bit more. We know we've got food deserts in these communities. How much does a life cost versus how much does it cost to clean up Cancer Alley, for example? You said the Trump administration came in and overturned all the good work for that stuff. And where's that? You know what I mean? We used to know how much we were worth, Angela, when they sold us, right? How much are they valuing us at now? Zero.
I
Because
want I do want to bring up one issue which I have, in which when I was at COP speaking with Governor Inslee and Senators Markey and Whitehouse, they all agreed that now, under the Trump administration, it is the state governments and the state alliances that pushing for the renewable energy transition, pushing for the regulations that protect their populations, their health, and their environment. And we see now also in red states, 900 factories have been built with the IRA for batteries and renewable energy in red states in the South. And
Dan,
those
do me a favor and say what the IRA is again for some people that may not.
That's That's the big climate bill that most of the money, about $1 trillion, was advocated for our energy transition investment. Some of it was the bill that helped cap the price of insulin from Medicare. So there was that small bit that was for health. Most of it was for climate and the energy transition. And now you have local governments, state governments, and federal representatives from the red state saying, please don't roll this back because my constituents depend on the jobs and my constituents depend on the money. We can't just abandon these factories. So that is a good thing, that the local governments and the local constituents will hold their representatives accountable because they need these things and they want these things. They also don't want to see their communities polluted and the health of their children endangered. These aren't, when it hits home, these are not stupid people, except when you think about the Texans whose children die from the measles, and they're still like, well, I did right, not vaccinating my children against measles. But generally, people do know when their communities are being polluted and it is affecting their health. They will push back. So if you can vote down ballot, it is vitally important that we elect state legislators, that we elect mayors, and I don't know, you can't usually vote for mayors when you vote down ballot, but all the local municipal officials and state level representatives are key to maintaining the progress we have made towards combating climate change.
I call them the first line of defense, right? Like you said, the local officials, there's your first line of defense. And so, Dana, I'm so grateful that you were here today. I learned a lot. Maybe we're going to have a part 2 to this and you come back again, because I know we didn't talk about everything and we kind of talked about other things, but it just reminds me it's all related, isn't it?
It's all interconnected. It is all interconnected. I'm so thrilled to be with both of you. I love having these conversations. I wish I saw more of Adrienne, and if I miss a day with Angela, I already miss her.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I know
Yeah,
y'all are besties and y'all talk all the freaking time. I know.
I'm,
So come
oh, come
back.
on. I talk to you all the time too.
Oh, shut up. Love fast. Love fast. No, but really, Dana, I learned so much. I do want you to come back. Angela, can we have her back? Because
Yeah,
I know we just scratched.
we'll definitely have Dana back because environment is so important. Um, just to just to follow up on what Dana said, there are elections all over the United States, but the two major ones are in New Jersey and Virginia. You can go and request an absentee ballot at votefromabroad.org, but there are state and local elections, mayor elections all over the United States. So it doesn't matter what state you are in, go request your absentee ballot. And if you can vote down ballot, then please do so because we need a lot of cities have Democratic mayors and city councils, and we need to make sure we maintain that blue wall against the red
Can I
tide.
ask, you know what? Can I ask Dana to say something uplifting before we leave? Because you did say you have hope. Can you just, because I'm starting to fade already because we're about to go and I'm like, going to miss you all, but can you just leave us with a little nugget of hope for the environment? Because we lay down some heavy stuff. And I just, because you said you have hope. So please leave us with just a little bit of maybe why you have hope or just encourage us to have hope, something.
My cup is almost always half full, Adrian, and I do have hope because I do ultimately believe in the power of the community to make a difference. I've seen this again and again in my life. I mean, it can be 2 steps, forward, 3 steps back. But I have seen the progress, and I have faith in communities, and I have seen that.
Oh, well, that is very inspiring. And once again, I want to thank Dana Freeling, the chair of the Environmental Climate uh, Council, and always thanking my friend Adrian. And I want to thank everybody that's listened today. And we'll see you, or you'll hear us next week. Happy Easter, everyone,
Happy Easter and happy Passover.
and happy Passover.